The Paintbrush tool and the Blob brush tool can be found in the same location in the toolbar. By default, it's displayed as the Paintbrush tool, but if I click and hold down, I can also find the Blob brush tool as well. And I usually prefer to work with creating what I call tear-off strips, which if I move my mouse over to the end, I can see a small button here. If I release my mouse, I create a small tear-off strip, so I can see both tools at once, so I can access them from here. I can still access them from there if I want to do so, but I like to see both options visible to me at the same time. So let's see how these tools work. They work very similar, but there are differences as well. So first of all, with the Paintbrush tool selected, I can click and drag and release and paint out a line. I can also increase the thickness of my brush line. Over here in the properties, I've got the stroke values. I can increase the thickness, and then I can click and drag and create another brush stroke. Now if I see these brush strokes in what's called outline mode and go to view and outline, I can see the actual artwork without the thickness applied to it. So although in normal view they appear to be two thicknesses, in outline mode we can see they're just a single line. Let's go back into normal view, which is the preview option, and we can see the difference in the effects. If I select, using the selection tool, I go back to my first path that I created, I can then select it, then go over to the properties and increase the stroke. And with the other one, I can select it. I can also reduce the stroke as well. So with a stroke applied to a line, we can increase a thicker stroke or a thinner stroke. So that's essentially the brush tool. One last thing I will show with the brush tool, however, is if I double click on it, I can find further adjustments. This is the accuracy setting. It defaults to the middle. If I move it to the far left, okay that, I'll set the stroke a little bit thinner. And if I click and drag and create a circle and release, I create a reasonably rounded circle. But if I double click on the brush again, this time I'm going to choose the smooth option, okay that, and try drawing a second circle. It tries to round it up for me, so it smooths out any kinks and bumps that I might have in my line. So that's a useful setting to know with the brush. Like I said, it defaults somewhere in between. That's okay that. Now moving on to the Blob tool. Let's see how this works. I'll give that a click. I can click and drag like so. I can create a thickness with it. If I want to increase the thickness of the Blob tool, I can double click on the tool button itself and it brings up some settings. Now here I can change the size. Notice I'm not increasing the stroke thickness through here. I've double clicked on the Blob tool and I can increase the size through here. I can drag the slider. I can see a larger button here. I can adjust the roundness so I can have an elliptical shape. I can change the angle as well if I want to do that. So I'll OK that. And I'll click and drag and draw out another line. Now if I look at these two shapes created with the Blob tool in outline view, we can see they look very different. It isn't a single line with a stroke applied to it. With the Blob tool, I'm actually painting a solid shape. I can continue painting the shape. If I click and drag inline mode, I can add to that shape. Keep adding and applying more area to it. I can do it with the other one as well, clicking and dragging. And if I go back to normal view, or preview, what I can now do with these shapes, because this is not an increased stroke, I can see here this is a fill. I'm painting a fill rather than a stroke. That means that I can select these shapes and I can apply a stroke to the shape. So if I click in this area here, I can either double click or bring up the swatches. I'll double click to bring up the color picker, and from here I can choose a color. I'll choose a red. Okay, that. I've now got a red stroke to my shape. Let's make that a little bit thicker so we can see it. So I've got a stroke on my shape now, which is something we can't do with this because it already is a stroke applied to a line. So that's how the two tools work differently. We've got the Paintbrush tool that creates a single line and we apply a stroke to it, or we have the Blob tool which actually paints a solid area or a solid shape.